Ah. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Breaking the Barriers. Today we have a very special topic to talk about because it is one of those things that both Red and I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about. So before I dive in and we do introductions, I just want to say to you listening to remember that you get to determine your reality and what is true for you. But our goal here in this program is to present potential alternative perspectives that maybe will land for you or maybe liberate you from perhaps limiting beliefs that you've held for a long time. So, if this lands in that way today, we're with you. It's hard to unpack. Let's talk about twin flames. All right, Red, if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Red Moon Eagle. I'm a psychic catalyst, teacher, healer, and this is one of the number one topics that cropped up into my sessions in 2017. All of a sudden, I was getting questions about this, and I did not know what to do with it because it's not a thing. So we're going to talk about that.
Oh, boy, are we going to talk about it today. And just in case you don't know me, I'm Safrianna Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide, and I help people be themselves and unpack what's limiting them from being themselves. We'll leave it at that today. So we're going to leap in by talking about the history of twin flames and sort of orient to what the concept means. So I'll just start with a theoretical concept, and then Red's going to get into some of the history. So, my understanding of twin flames for the longest time was that there was this other entity, another half of your soul, that at some point in time split off from you and you incarnated into two different bodies, and your whole mission is to come back together in the most ultimate loving relationship you ever imagined. Sounds like a Disney fairy tale, doesn't it? And it is. Because I just want to debunk right away that in soul groups, I love the analogy of a soul group as a flower connected by this, center. I don't know what you call that, like the center stamen something. I don't know these terms. But it's the center part with all the petals coming off. And the idea of a twin flame was that the petal had two halves, a masculine and a feminine. And right there, you've officially lost me when I really look at it, because we all have that masculine and feminine energy in us. It's not something that gets split off no matter what. So this was the concept of twin flame, that you're looking for your other half of your petal on your soul group, which go listen to our prior episode if you want more on that. And I'm going to talk a lot today about my own personal experiences with this, but I've held this belief for so long that there was this perfect half for me out there that would make me feel so much better about myself. Not the case. So let's talk about the history, because this isn't something that has been around for forever. And in fact, I feel like it was brought into dominant culture by actually a white couple that had some really culty, toxic stuff
Yeah.
going on. But yeah, what is the further history?
So you have to look at kind of the world dynamic piece. And this is my love of deep dive into theosophy and different backgrounds. So you find a little bit of talk about souls, twin souls, soul connections, all those things. They go back to, there's presence in Hindu with the Shakti Kundalini. You can see it in Zoroastrian speak. They have a whole thing about the twin of the soul. Egypt talked about the duality. The Gnostics, the early Christians talked about the duality. Yin and yang, light and shadow. We see the duality, that perspective. Now, where we get the mythos of the split soul actually comes, we know for specifically, it's talked about both in Hindu texts, and it's also talked about by Plato and Phaedrus. And Plato and Phaedrus both wrote about, there was a creature that had two heads, four arms, four legs, all that. And Zeus got in the middle of it and split the two. So it's one entity that was split into two. It is a myth. Okay, it is a myth. And if you look anthropologically at how people when we reproduce, occasionally we have twin births and we have triplicate births and we have multiple births. And there have been birth defects over the eons where you have a baby born with two heads, or maybe it was and we know this from science. We know this from how zygotes and embryos split, and sometimes it doesn't finish splitting and it creates these. I mean, truly, if you're 2000 years ago and you know nothing about science, that can be a pretty horrific experience, right? Like if you gave birth to someone who had severe birth defects like this, and they may not have lived very long, like there's a real place anthropologically of where we start seeing that being brought up in religion and philosophy and different paradigms to explain the world. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then, interestingly enough, Marie Corelli wrote a book about the twin flame in her book in 1886. It was a romance novel. And she was an author that wrote very much having studied the early Greek and the early writers of European history. And then you start seeing Edna and Guy Ballard, and they were the prominent leaders in the I am philosophy. And it is a cult. I'm going to, sorry, y'all, but it is a cult. They definitely used cult dynamics to control their group. And then you had Elizabeth Care Prophet. She was the leader of the Cut cult that actually settled here in Montana. Like Montana still has families that are descendants of or still even belong to the Cut organization. And she talked about the soulmate and the twin flame. And then you had most recently, we've got Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, we've got Jeff and Sheila Devine. Jeff and Sheila Devine were the ones that really were talked about in the Netflix series, and they were the ones who really pushed the twin flame universe.
Mm-hmm.
And in dovetail with all this at the same time, so the Ballards and the Prophets, they all kind of came out of the 70s and 80s into the 90s. The Prophet book was written in 99, I believe, but she was really kind of like building that up in the early 90s. And then you had a little bit of a lull in this soulmate twin flame paradigm. It kind of lulled in the early 2000s, and then you had the Daybells and the Divines in the mid 2000s really kind of start talking about it. But at the same time that this is happening in the late 80s, early 90s into the early 2000s, you have more discussion that's happening about neuroscience and how our neurons and the mirroring of neurons, that was part of a conversation in the neuroscience world. And then you started having some people talk about, and I wish I could remember her name, Trenor, I believe is her name. She started talking about the phenomenon of limerence. And it is actually considered in some circles with mental health about being an actual mental health disorder, because there is this dopamine receptor trigger. You meet somebody and you fall in love right away. And there is this fixation on the person. And there's also the hemophilia, which I believe is the disorder of falling in love over and over and over again. And that can be kind of confused with limerence, or maybe they're the same thing. It kind of depends on which psychologist and neuroscientist you talk to. But you add then addictive behaviors, you add objectification of your partner, you add different kinds of attachment disorders into this neuroscience, and then this spiritual conversation of, oh, I'm the other half of another thing, person, whatever. And there is some layers here to untangle.
Yes.
And it's important when I talk to people, clients, because when they started coming at me in 2017, I just literally went, it's not a thing. And I don't even know where the hell you're getting it from. I didn't do any research in 2017, 18. I just basically went, this is dumb. My answer is no.
My guides are like,
right. I've never, ever had a guide affirm, confirm, or support soulmate, twin flame, the other half of you that you're seeking to fulfill your wholeness in this life. Any of that. If anything, they either get really, really quiet and they don't say anything at all because they're like, no, right? Or they're just as adamant about, hey, can you please tell them, no, this is not a thing? Please help them understand. Like, I've been asked by guides to help people understand it's not a thing. So in 2019, 2020 is when I really started going, okay, I know there's more history here. I want to kind of dive into it. And then preparing for this podcast, I was like, I feel like I need to go back to my notes and find what I found before, because there is something about, if you add a mental health issue and you add poor attachment style, lots of trauma, you add those things into someone's childhood, and then you get a charismatic leader, you get somebody who has all the answers, and I'm going to use that word loosely because that's not a real thing.
Right.
And this fantastical idea that if you're a spiritual person, then you have to be more with someone.
That you
Like,
need to find that other half, or
yeah,
you're just not going to be whole.
I cannot wrap my head around it. I really can't. I truly struggle understanding how people get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also why I like to understand how they got there.
Yeah.
To help them untangle it, because it is so messy.
Very.
And there's a lot of really charismatic people out there that really want you to buy into that.
I'm gonna get into some of my personal experience today, because I did meet a person who I thought / he thought we were twin flames, and it was a whole hot mess. We're gonna get there, but before we move on from the history, I just want to, this duality piece.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we like duality. We
Of course.
live in a very two ends of the spectrum kind of world, and it requires two people with different kinds of reproductive bits of cells and such to be able to make a new human.
Yep.
So it takes two beings to put the two things together to get the new human. And so, of course, it makes sense that we like this idea of the ultimate two beings. It's become so culturally ingrained, though, and that's what I want to move into, is this cultural obsession with finding the one. Whether you've ever heard of the term twin flame or twin soul or not, almost everybody has seen the Disney movie when they were
Yep.
a kid, or watched a rom-com, or
Read a romance novel,
even watched their parents be high school sweethearts,
yeah,
and grow up together and be married for 50 plus years. Like, we've
yeah,
all had exposure to that romantic ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's cultural. It's very modern in some ways too. Like, we have histories of all kinds of relationship styles and big family communities, and not valuing your partner over anyone else, and this idea that there is one other entity out there aside from your entity that is the most important for you to find and be with and join with, is very diminishing of our own worth and value.
It is. And it's created, I mean, Helen Fisher wrote a book, and I wish I could remember the title. I was looking for it earlier and I couldn't find it. But she's done a lot of research. She's an anthropologist. She's studied neuroscience, MRI. She's gone around the world to find different cultures. How do they look at love? How do they look at relationships, and how dynamic it can be? And there is a piece that people need to really realize. If you're looking out in the world right now and the dumpster fire that it is, we are living the result of diminishing each other in relationships. We are watching it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just women, it's men as well. Like, how awful for anyone to think that if you don't find your one person, you can't have a healthy relationship with anybody. That is so damaging. If I could scream at the top of the building next to me just how awful it is, I would if I thought it would do any good. But there is this piece about our modern culture that we like to think that we're so enlightened, and we like to think that we're so accepting. And, the whole DEI thing, right? Like diversity
Mhm.
and equity and inclusion. And yet we diminish each other in our intimate relationships. We diminish each other in our
All the
friendships.
time.
I love reading. There's some older books that I loved as a kid. And I'm sure everybody's heard of Anne of Green Gables, right? And how she had her best friend Diana Barry, right? Like they were just their best friends of the whole world, right? And they had, over the series of all these books, this amazing friendship that was rich and dynamic. And Ellen Montgomery wrote about the richness of that female and female relationship. And Anne did get married, and she had kids, and she married her high school sweetheart, and the fuck up that she did in the middle, like how dynamic. She wrote about it from a real place, like the real
Mhm.
dynamic of real people. And I thought it was really interesting. She's a Canadian author,
Mm.
and the Canadian culture has its toxicities, just like any Western culture does. But in the same time period where that book came out, the Little House on the Prairie books came out. And I have never been able to read a full one of those without being nauseous. I know a lot of people love them, but the overlay of the submissiveness and the
Mm.
giving up your autonomy in those books, it's like reading indoctrination of diminishing of the self to be with someone else.
Mm.
And these are old books, and they were written all in the same time period. And those are generationally like my parents' reading material, right?
Right.
When I read them. And then you have Disney, you've got media, you've got all these love stories. There's a whole genre in science fiction about finding your soulmate. They all make me nauseous. All of them.
We're going to have to talk at some point about one of the storylines in one of my sci-fis and see how you feel about it. But yes, this is, unpacking this obsession with this one.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the concept of unity consciousness and separation consciousness, because I've heard, and I think this is actually part of that I am
Yes,
teaching,
it is.
that we find our unity consciousness by finding the other half. No, you find unity consciousness by realizing that all beings are one, all beings, not one other entity. Unless that other entity is God or the universe or whatever you want to call the ultimate, like that, yes, is
But
unity
yet,
consciousness.
and yet we belong to that too, right? Like it's not
We're
the
part of
other.
it.
You're not looking for another meat suit to be the other half of your meat suit.
Right.
Yes, we can have connection to people, but you should never give up your autonomy. You
Yes.
should never give up who you are to blend in to match someone else. That blows my mind.
Right.
I
Yeah.
genuinely struggle with how that happens.
And that's part of the journey of this third dimension, right? Is that we are individual parts of the whole having an experience, and trying to bypass and find one other entity to remerge with is not going to get you closer to godliness or whatever universal truth exists out there. That comes with being one with all other beings. And so I want to jump into cults, control, codependency. Like this is where I'm going to share a little bit of my own story. So I don't even remember how this happened. That's how much of a blur it was. I don't remember when I first heard the term twin flame or twin soul, or how it came about. But I had just entered a relationship that at the time that this conversation took place, I did not yet recognize it was domestic violence, intimate partner violence, control. And I don't even remember who said it first, but we were sitting in the car, and my soul had a recognition that I had met this person before. And I looked across the car at him and I said, "We're going to get it right this time." Now, my ego then, we're like a week into the relationship, is like, we're going to get married. We're going to have kids. It's going to be this glorious, beautiful thing. No, getting it right meant completely severing ties and like saying,
Yes.
never
Yeah.
again. Bye.
Yes. Yeah.
That was what it ultimately meant. But
Yeah.
somewhere in this conversation, the term twin flame dropped in. And it was a ball and chain from that point. Because as
Yes.
soon as that term came in, it became an excuse for abuse and
Yes.
control. We're going through this because we're twin flames. And the story of a twin flame is this chaser, runner chaser dynamic. And it's going to get really bad before it gets really good.
No.
If it's really bad, you get the hell out of
Get
there
out.
now, friends. You
Get out.
go. It's not going to get better. But
No.
that was, and I mean, I was in this relationship for 7 years,
Yeah.
almost, not quite a full 7 years, but almost a full 7 years, because I had this ego story
Mhm.
that this was my Disney prince.
Yep.
We just had to overcome the dragons and we would live happily ever after. And there were multiple times where I would come to the, like, I think we need to end this. And he'd come right back in with, but we're twin flames.
Right.
We're supposed to work this out. So if anyone has to use a label or a quote unquote spiritual reality, I'm using very big air quotes here for those of you who can't see me, a quote unquote spiritual reality that you're meant to be in this toxic dynamic, that's karmic swirl shit.
Yeah.
That's just you being lost in the sauce of pain and suffering and thinking that that's the way things are supposed to be.
It's also the use of spiritual beliefs and religion to harm.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a fundamental thing that I will rail against forever.
Yeah.
The love bombing, the using this to control your partner. I have seen people really struggle in relationships when they have a partner that is using this to harm, to control, to bypass the real work.
Mm-hmm.
The key thing about soul flames, soulmates, and apparently there's another term that's new, and I can never hold on to it, but there is this idea that the push-pull dynamic is supposed to be part of it. No.
Mm-hmm.
And the objectification and obsession is okay. And no, it is not okay. And if you think you're in love with someone and they are not reciprocating, and you're using this as an excuse to continue your bad behavior, you're moving into a mental health position, and you need to deal with that with a professional, with a counselor. And please, not a counselor that buys into the spiritual bypassing, because I've actually met counselors, unfortunately, thank goodness, not you, Safrianna, but I have met them that have not only bought into this modality, like this spiritual bypassing thing, to manipulate their clients.
Mm-hmm.
It is so scary because it's easy to get caught in this authoritarian place, and where people's ego gets triggered. And that's the other thing with any of the soul flame, twin flame, soulmate. I can't even keep the words right. Is that it is used in manipulation and control. There's often a financial aspect to this. They want to control your finances, unrealistic promises
Mm-hmm.
around it within the relationship. There's this expectation of being unquestioningly devoted to your partner, no matter how bad they are.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, no. The use of fear and intimidation. Like, you're like, oh, I think this is going to be a little uncomfortable. And like, but wait a minute, what would happen if you're my twin flame? How scary is that going to be for you out in the world all by your lonesome? Secrecy, deception, and not being good enough. There is something about never being good enough for your partner in this twin
Mm-hmm.
flame soulmate thing. I've totally seen this where both
Yep.
partners, even the most vulnerable partner, the one that's being victimized, the one that's in the victim of the domestic violence situation, I have seen them also buy into this, well, you're not good enough for me in this. And then the offender that's probably like the one, not always, but sometimes there's like physical abuse, financial abuse. So like there's a lot of dynamics there, but both of them using that twin flame soulmate soul twin thing, like all becoming part of the mess that they use to control each other,
Yep.
because neither of them are healthy.
Yes. I mean, I had to work through that mentally. Like, this person is not my twin flame. I need to let go of that concept because it is holding me hostage. And
Yes.
I remember doing all of this research. Like, what
Mhm.
is it? What does this mean? Because I've had that happen multiple times in my life where like a term has dropped in or I've said something out loud that I'm like, I literally don't know what that means. I need to go
Yeah.
look it up.
Yeah.
Um, so I did, and I looked it up, and there's like all kinds of resources on Google. I haven't looked in years, but like it'll say like the 7 steps of a twin flame relationship or the 9 phases of a twin flame relationship. And when you read through them, it literally is the honeymoon phase of domestic violence,
Yep.
followed by the tension building phase with an acute episode in there.
Yep.
And then after that
Mhm.
is when you find your unity. And
Mhm.
we rode that domestic violence rodeo. I could hundreds of times,
Yep.
and we never came to the unity. But
No.
again, I if your relationship looks like that, you run, you go the other way. Again,
Yes.
any term, any label, like that is not healthy. And if this is my belief, if such a thing as twin flames existed, it wouldn't be with all that pain because it would be a unity of your soul, but it doesn't exist. It's
No.
not like that.
It does not
So
exist. It
this
does
this
not exist.
this control piece, and I mean, I was so codependent in my past that of course this was like the perfect tactic to keep me
Yeah.
stuck in, because I
Mhm.
was like, oh well, if you really are my other half, then I need to do whatever I can to maintain this relationship. and
Yeah.
and hopefully, again, I know Red and I are very spicy about this, but we're talking about it in the ultimate compassion and love, because
Yes.
especially as someone who has survived this,
Mhm.
I mean, I've written relaunch live now of a woman's
Yes.
work, by the
I'm
way.
so
I
excited.
talk about this relationship in this book, of how much this relationship diminished me and made me feel like I, needed him to
Yeah.
be worth it or something. And that is the story of so many people running
Mhm.
around. I want to circle back. Red, you said something earlier about the childhood trauma piece.
Oh, yeah.
I experienced extreme childhood neglect
Yep.
and lack of love. So when the
Yep.
love bomber showed up, that's what I call him in my writing.
Oh,
When
yeah.
when the
Oh,
love
yeah.
bomber showed up, I was like, someone's
Oh,
giving me all of this attention. Oh my gosh, he's taking
yeah.
me out on fancy dates for my birthday and getting me chocolates. And we're driving around in the car in the sunlight, and it's so dreamy. And we're sitting in parks, and it's so beautiful. And then, we're 2 weeks in, and well, I mean, we were a week in when the first assault happened. Like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
literally as soon as the assault happened, he went, "That was an assault because I
No,
love you. Don't you
because I
know how
love
much
you.
I love you?"
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
3 days in. And I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Clearly that's it." So we are easier to manipulate than sometimes we would like to
Oh,
believe,
yeah.
because of our experiences of vulnerability, of
Yes.
desiring love, of desiring connection, of desiring that special someone that we have grown up being told we could have. And
Yes.
as a polyamorous person now, I can firmly tell you there is no such thing as the one. I have been in, couldn't tell you how many different relationships,
Mhm.
and I'm in 2 right now, and neither
Yeah.
of them are the one, but I'd like to have them in my life forever. Sure.
Yeah.
That's the
Exactly.
difference, because they're healthy and communicative, and we don't have to run this rodeo of
And no
honeymoon
one
phasing and blowing up.
and no one's incomplete without the other.
Right.
You are all complete as who you are.
Right. Yes, we are all complete as who we are.
Yes. You said something a minute ago and I went, "Oh my god." So many, many years ago, I too did not have the greatest childhood in some ways. There was a lot of emotional abuse and physical abuse and neglect as well, but the neglect wasn't as obvious. Um, and one of the things that I have been since high school absolutely fervent about, if you want to date me, I don't want chocolates. I don't want teddy bears. I don't want gifts. You better not bring me dead flowers either. And I've had that since high school. And the reason I had it since high school is I watched over and over and over again different women and men in my life, young people like I was, do this love bombing with each other. And we didn't have that phrase when I was in high school. I'm of a different generation. That phrase was not in the vocabulary. And it was kind of expected and it felt gross.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a boyfriend. I say boyfriend, we loosely dated for a couple of months. And then I dated another guy at the same time and he got mad about it and I didn't understand. Because I thought dating was you dated many people. I didn't think it was like a commitment thing. Like, I don't want to
You gotta have
marry
the
you.
commitment conversation in there, yeah.
Right? I was a little naive both on that end, not understanding that my understanding of dating and their understanding of dating were two very different culturally dynamic conversations. But both of them decided to do this war where they would give me flowers and chocolates and teddy bears, and there was like this love bombing war happening, and I was so disgusted by the whole thing that I didn't talk to them. I completely did a terrible thing. I ghosted both of them. I just quit talking to both of them completely. I just was like, this is disgusting. I don't like this. And my girlfriends and some of my friend group, they were completely baffled. They were like, but this is what you want, Red. And I went, no,
Not
this
what I
is
want.
this is wrongness, right? I didn't have a framework. I didn't have a framework of why it didn't feel good. I didn't really understand the love bombing. I didn't have the psychology and the know-how. I just knew from both my guides and the experience that this could lead to something that's really awful. And I've already experienced this awful thing as a child with someone that should love me and should care about me and should be unconditional. And it took me decades to unwind it. But there is something about how we do this to each other culturally from a very young
Very young
age.
age.
And we encourage it with our children. And I have to say this because this is like a funny thing. I have a stepson who's in his 20s and he worked for Taco Bell a while ago. And he was, we were talking about something the other day or today. And I said something about we were going to do this podcast. And he goes, oh, I have to tell you. And there was a young girl on the line with him. And she was talking to another employee about twin flames. And she was explaining all the rules and how it worked and everything. And he goes, and I turned to her and said, do you know you sound like an idiot? And I thought, hallelujah, I have made sure that my stepson does not buy into this.
Does not drink the Kool-Aid.
Doesn't drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I wish that I had had somebody at that point in my life or some other story that there is no one, but when I think back, I do remember being raised. I was raised Christian. We didn't go to church for a very long time, but I was raised with the Christian ideals and beliefs. And one of them was that you're waiting to find the one, that you save yourself for marriage and then you get married and that's your person.
Right.
And like even that can lead to this again, whether you know the term twin flame or not, there is this pervasive cultural underpinning idea that you're going to find that one person and you're going to settle down with them for forever and you're going to ride the waves. And then there's this normalized domestic violence, intimate
Yes.
partner violence that is layered in there too, that makes it harder for people because they don't have that information to
Right.
step away from it. My frame of reference again was, oh my gosh, I'm getting bombed by all this love, which only lasted a very brief amount of time. It was about 2 to 4 weeks before it died down. And then all the abuse came in. But then my nervous system went, oh, that's normal. Because that was
Right.
my childhood experience. So
Yes.
when we have to look at the whole history of our trauma when we're looking at how we
Yeah.
approach relationships, how we attach, the stories that we tell ourselves
Mhm.
about what's acceptable in relationships, because what's quote unquote acceptable in relationships, again, is often a mirror of what we saw our parents' dynamic be. And a lot of us didn't grow up with healthy parental dynamics in our lives. Again, pop culture references. There's a beautiful piece that was written by a bio number 6, where she talks about how she read this, she went and saw Cinderella when she was a little girl, and she found her husband, she found the quote unquote one, they got married, and she thought literally that was going to solve all of her problems. And it obviously didn't. And then she had to confront later in life, like, oh, wow, I really had the seed planted of the one from Cinderella.
Yep.
That there is this perfect match and everything is just going to be this glorious fairy tale. And again, I get it because I was there. I was that person that
Yeah.
felt so empty on my own and like something was missing.
Mhm.
And I was looking for that in another person. So I want to just say that I think all of us go through that at some point in
Mhm.
time because it's cultural, because it's conditioned. We're surrounded by cult like mentality everywhere that teaches these things too.
Yep.
But there is a spiritual layer to things to talk about here that I just want to briefly touch on, which is that there are some people that genuinely do have a quote unquote other half, but it is not a twin flame. And
No.
I want to talk about that because um again, if I had had a lot more context when I was younger, things might have been a lot different. But there are entities that, for whatever reason, made the choice to split into two separate bodies at some point in time. And it's the same soul
Mhm.
in two separate bodies.
Mhm.
So, first of all, that's not romantic at all.
No.
It's not, you wouldn't want that, even if
Nope. And it's not gonna be your high school boyfriend. I guarantee you.
not, yeah.
Period.
So, Red, you were the first one to introduce me to the concept of split existence
Yeah.
beings. So, would you be willing to explain that and how that can cause some confusion for people looking for their other half sometimes?
Well, I've known about it my whole life. To me, it was just something that I figured everybody kinda knew that. Ignorant me, not realizing. So the split entity is an entity that, back to, I say this all the time, we are quantumly connected, multidimensional entities. We just happen to have a piece of ourselves in this three-dimensional meat suit, okay? Right. Touch it, feel it, taste it, see it, smell it, this is you, right? And our depth of love and compassion for each other is multidimensional. So when you are if you're an entity that is split, right? There's a piece of you that is living a whole nother life. There's an undercurrent of a knowingness that other things are happening, but it's not like you're broken. It's not like there's half of you missing. You're just aware that half of you or parts of you are doing other things. It's actually more like there's activity somewhere and you're getting this weird input. Yeah, but I didn't do that. Did I? No, I didn't do that. Something else is going on. It's a felt sense, usually with most split entities. It's not, there's another half of me missing. You can't miss another half of you. You are all of who you are. I don't know how to say that more emphatically, actually. You are complete.
Mhm.
When you are going through the vast loneliness, the depression, the deep felt sense that something is wrong, there is trauma, there's things to work on, there might be mental health, there might be neurochemical things you might need help with. I mean, genuinely, there's a lot of other things besides going and looking for the other half of your soul wandering around in another meat suit somewhere on this planet. And no, the other half of you is not going to be the dog or the cat either. Please don't go there. I have had all kinds of things in sessions that I've had to untangle. When I say breaking the barriers, I am breaking these. They don't belong. We
Yeah.
have wonderful creative imaginations, and I give the human being this amazing credit for it. But let's not get it confused, please.
Yeah. And it's, again, there's so much complex spiritual reality
Yeah.
that, of course, we've talked about this a lot in this
Yeah.
program and our other programs, that we want so much to understand, to learn, to
Yeah.
know, to make sense of
Mhm.
things. And we simply can't make sense of it all in these 3D meat
No.
suits. Our brains are not built to process that. Or if they are,
we haven't gotten there.
We haven't pulled it online yet.
We haven't gotten there. I mean, if you talk about Zoom calls to somebody that lived 4,000 years ago, they're going to clock you upside the head with their meat club and walk away because there's something wrong with you, right? So there is something about, I am sure there are things that we haven't gotten to yet that I hope we will eventually get to if we don't go back through the dark ages first. But split entities are extraordinarily rare here on Earth. They're usually split somewhere else. They don't overlap through a whole life very often. And when they're here, if you meet one, I guarantee you, you will hate them. It's the magnet thing. They won't come together.
So to clarify what you just said, if you were a split entity and you found your other
it would be immediate rejection.
It would be repelling magnets. Not if you meet a split existence being.
No.
Just you're same.
If you two are in meat suits, you will hate each other. And it will be instantaneous. It will have no rational explanation. And everybody around both of you would go, this is really weird. You two should be like the best of friends. We don't understand.
You're the same person practically. Why don't you like each other?
Yeah. So first off, don't force it. Period. You should never force that. Accept it. If you don't like somebody, you don't like somebody. It's okay to not like somebody. Yay.
You can not like them at a distance, and that's fine. Let them do their thing over there.
And split entity is not common. Okay. Like I've seen them in session. Maybe one every 5 or 6 years. And for a long time, it was like one I knew about, but they didn't come see me in session, right? Like I had seen them at the store type thing. Like I didn't even know them, right? Like I see it out in the wild, but really kind of rare. And if I do get 3 or 4 like succinctly together, first off, they don't know each other, right? Like those individuals that are having a split existence don't know each other. And they like move away and I never hear from them again. It's this bizarre, like rare thing. I mean, there's billions of people on the earth, so I don't know what that quote, I feel like I need to meet a statistician that follows me around and quantifies all these rare things.
Just walks through airports with you, just taking, you're like, oh, that one's a this, that one's a that, that one, yep.
Yeah.
The checklist.
Yeah, whatever the math is on that, I don't know, but it's not common. And, you know, go look at our previous podcast where we talk about contracts. Like that actually explains a lot of what people think they're experiencing.
That's true. Yeah. You know, I would definitely recommend listening to our soul groups episode as well as the contracts episode, because were those the same episode? We've had so many conversations, it all blurs together.
I feel like we've untangled quite a few of these a little bit along the way. Like we dropped the nugget and now we're going back and like, okay, we should probably clarify that.
Okay. Blueprint contracts is the episode I'm referring to, because that we do talk a little bit about soul groups. We talk about contracts, and like contracts showing up, we feel an intense attraction to someone for a reason. It might not be a romantic attraction. Does not. It literally, when I say attraction, it's just we're being drawn together. Not polar opposite magnets, but being drawn together magnets.
Yes.
Because there's an agreement that we've made to work on something. So again, with the twin flame narrative, I've never heard an agreement in it. We're doing the runner chaser thing, and it's dramatic and it's bombastic, and that's the roller coaster of intimate partner violence. Unfortunately, I've never yet heard of a twin flame, quote unquote, twin flame relationship that doesn't have that crazy swirl of up and down, and we're together and we're apart and we're running and we're chasing and we're screaming at each other, but it's all okay because we're meant to be together and join in this lifetime for greater purpose. That's a soul contract. Yeah, you can join together for greater purpose, but it should never ever be couched in abuse.
Yeah, and there is something about because I read about limerence a long time ago, and I kind of went, I wonder if that's the biochemical piece that triggers sometimes that, oh, I have this deep feeling. But unfortunately, what happens with that whole limerence thing is it's an obsession. It becomes very objectified. It becomes very one-sided. I mean, that's kind of the definition of the limerence, is that it's this hot thing that happens. I think there's more of a mental health aspect to that. I think there's, from what I understand of looking at how that plays out, it very much often plays out one-sided. It's on the person that's experienced this big dopamine hit, this fantastical obsession, this hemophilia, I believe is what it's called, where you just fall in love over and over and over again. But that's all backed up by what we know about unhealthy attachment styles, disorganized attachment styles, or insecure attachment styles, obsessive attachment styles, avoidance attachment styles. Like there's some science-ish. I mean, I know it's called the soft science, but when you watch behaviors over and over and over again, and then I can't help but to look at some of these, and I look at the bio numbers, and I look at how different bio number shadows come up. Like, we've talked a lot about the light and the shadow. That goes back into the yin and the yang, the twin, the duality conversation here of
Right.
twin flame. But in the unhealthy aspect of each bio number, when somebody's not aligned very well, some of those shadows can show up in that seeking love in an unhealthy way. So I will use my dear bio number 4 as an example. Bio number 4's the love is in the relationship. That's what they bring, right? But then the shadow can be, I'm always going to be alone, or I'm always lonely. And there's a sacrifice that you will see bio number 4's do. They'll talk themselves into feeling like they have to sacrifice who they are to maintain the other person's connection to them, so that they don't sit in that I'm the alone shadow, right? And they give up their identity. Twos give up their identity. Not every single one of the bio numbers has an aspect and this potentiality, especially if there's trauma on top of it, and some of this, a trauma or abuse or the internal shadow dialogue that gets flared up basically is fed a lot of bullshit. And they will give up their autonomy.
Yep.
And all of them have it. Every single bio number is vulnerable to that in their own way. Their own shadow has that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so you and I have talked a lot about, like, how do you feed the healing aspect of the capacity of the shadow into the capacity of the light without getting sucked into these cult-like dynamics where you give up your identity and you give up your power, and yet it's not the toxic individualism. It's more of a understanding of how communities and how relationships are in a healthy way. And we have forgotten how to do that. We have forgotten how to do this.
Yep.
We are all trying to figure it out.
We're all trying to break free from cultural cults too, whether it be organized religion or politics or even like small family communal dynamics or xenophobic beliefs. Like we're all,
social media is a cult in its own way, right?
Yeah,
like
we're all unpacking this stuff. So give yourself grace as you unpack this.
Yeah.
And again, this topic is a really intense one, because I have not had very many conversations with people who don't think twin flames are a thing, because it's become such a cultural phenomena. It's come to the mainstream, and we have to keep unpacking it, because again, I'm gonna sing it till the cows come home of if there is abuse, it's not a healthy relationship, no matter what way you try to spin it.
Nope.
I have very big doubts when it comes to even those soul contracts. I think that if there was a soul contract where abuse is agreed upon, it's going to be brief. It's not going to be this like ongoing thing. It's going to be oh, you need to learn to break free from that. I'm going to come in. I'm going to, give it to you in some way, and you're going to get out of there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because both people have a choice. That's one of the things that we've talked about over and over and over in all of our calls is choice, 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 choice.
Yep.
Because there is something about no matter whose contract you have with who, there's always a choice.
Yeah.
And unpacking all of this has to be it has to be an uncomfortable conversation. I think that's
Mhm.
where I come back to all the time with this is that I think you've encountered more of the soul contracts, soul group, twin flamey type conversations in the metaphysical because I'm very unpopular in that. And I know this. Like I have been involved in Wicca communities and spiritual communities since way back before it was a thing you talked about out loud in front of mixed company.
Right.
And I have always been the most unpopular person in the room with this topic because I've never had it affirmed. If anything, every guide constantly comes back to it can't be a thing because there is choice. And we have so many things we're here to do. And it's so complex and it's so rich of an experience that sounds like something that you would, if it were a thing, it would devalue and nullify choice. And the universe is not going to do that. There is
Right.
nothing I have seen that nullifies choice unless you give it up. But even then, you have the choice tomorrow to say, yeah, I'm taking my shit back. I don't want to play in this sandbox. I'm going to take my choice and go somewhere else. And this is the piece that I know this can be a heavy topic, and I know this can be very controversial in the spiritual community. I'm okay with being that controversial piece because we have to have difficult conversations to learn to be together in a healthier way.
Mhm.
And I think we can do this. And I think that we can my partner, whom I absolutely adore with all of my heart, he's so amazing. One of the things that I love about him is that from the very beginning, I've been, you have to deal with your shit and I'll deal with my shit, but we come together in a relationship. And we fucked it up. Oh my God. We have made some epic mistakes. We have hurt each other. But we make a choice every day to come back together. And sometimes we talk about difficult things and sometimes we avoid it. We play avoidance games 100%
As do we all.
because we're human and we're in a lived experience. But he said something a long time ago that just made me love him all over again. And every day I think of almost every day, especially when I'm having a rough day. He said, you can love somebody and see their compassion and their care and their givingness and still acknowledge that they fuck up and they make mistakes and they hurt your feelings. That's called being in the human existence, and that's part of it. And also doesn't mean that you have to be a victim. You don't have
Mhm.
to allow somebody to abuse you, right?
Yep.
And he has been so healing for me because, like your partners, right? Like you and I have both had really bad experiences in relationships. And we've both been through some pretty horrific things. And I'm just so blessed to know that this person that I'm choosing to be in my life would never hurt me, understands the power and control wheel before he understood the power and control wheel, and is doing his own work too, right? Like we're
Mhm.
figuring it out and we're fucking it up as we go. And we keep choosing each other. There
Communication is
is,
key.
yeah, there is no such thing as a perfect relationship.
Right.
And hurt people. You're going to hurt your partner. They are going to hurt you. This is part of it. This is called the lived experience. Life is messy. If you want it to be perfect, you are going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
You're going to have great
And
times and sad times. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a difference between the regular everyday
Yes.
issues with relationships versus something unhealthy. And on that note, I do just want to pitch if you would like more information about that, the shadow side with Safrianna, which is another of my podcasts. I have multiple
Yeah.
episodes on domestic violence and
Mhm.
abuse and what that looks like. One is literally with an organization where I interview them on how they
Yes.
serve people. So you can absolutely go check out. I talk about the power and control wheel in one of the episodes, and we talk all about it in my episode with Hartley House. So you can absolutely check those out if you want more information about that,
Yes.
or go Google the power and control wheel, because
Yeah.
when that stuff is showing up, that's not okay. It's
No.
totally okay to have a communication blunder, to accidentally, the thing I never let my wife live down is they ate my lo mein noodles out of the fridge when I was really in a bad mood, and I just wanted my lo mein noodles at the end of the long day, and they weren't there, and I was like, I wept. I like opened. That's the kind of mess ups that are okay in a
Yes.
relationship, and you laugh about it later, but you
Yeah.
don't really laugh later when it's abuse.
Yeah.
You can't. So as we come to the end of our time today, I just want to remind you to love yourself and
Yes.
to show up for yourself, to be authentic, and to, again, if abuse is happening, there is no excuse for it. You
Right.
run the other way. And if you don't feel like you can run the other way because it's that scary, I get you. I have been there too. There are so many organizations and places out there that you can get assistance on how to navigate that. And you can
And you
reach
don't
out to
have to
Red or
do it
I.
alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to do it alone. Safrianna does the Shadow Side with Safrianna podcast. She has a lot of experience with counseling with people. She knows a lot of resources. I am actually working with a domestic violence shelter. I'm working on protocol reviews. I am also working in this domestic violence place. I've been there, you've been there. Unfortunately, there are places in our world where it is looked at that if you are a victim, if you are living in that power and control wheel, that it's all your fault and it's just up to you to leave.
Mm,
I want you to know that you're seen and that is not a true statement and you're not alone. You can reach out and resources can be found. And it's not just you. Many people are in this, but I
many.
know it can feel very alone. And reach out to us. We've got resources. We can find you connections.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as always, thank you so much for listening. If there's a topic you want us to cover, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know
Yeah.
what that is. We are here to break the barriers and talk about the things that people aren't talking about. That's just
Mhm.
my MO these days. That's why I have Shadow Side and this.
Yes.
I'm like, let's just talk about the bullshit in society and
Yep.
unpack it so we're not controlled by it anymore. We get
Yeah.
that power of free will and choice back firmly in our own hands.
Yep.
So, thanks for listening. Thank you, as always, Red. And until next time, my friends, we love you, we see you, we believe you, and we're cheering you on. Bye for
Bye
now.
bye.